the whole concept of SAYge is to get away from the superficial nature of social media and putting
Mhm.
on our filters. You've been through an incredible journey, and it's powerful. And it's powerful for women to hear. And the reason you're telling it is to help
Mhm.
those women that are listening feel like, okay, I'm not alone, or okay, like, life isn't perfect. And that makes me feel better.
Right.
So the more authentic and open and candid we are with each other, I really feel so strongly that it breaks down barriers. I would love to start by asking you, Judy, why are you sharing your story today?
So for me, as an adoptee, um, you carry kind of a loss, right? Of something that you never really had. And you, for me, I carried along kind of like this feeling of rejection all my life. And so I had always sought out to identify me and my roots. And so the ability to tell my story, and I think that every time you do tell a story, good or bad, it gives you this sense of healing along with it. So every time I tell my story or I discuss being adopted with someone else that may be adopted or just telling my story in general, it brings a sense of healing. And it also gives me an opportunity to connect with other people that'll be able to share experiences and possibly advocate for those that are adoptees seeking to find their families, having already found their families and their experiences, and for those that have been, or those that are the parents being sought, to be able to maybe speak with them and have them hear our stories or my story before reaching out or connecting with their child.
I think what you're doing by sharing all of this is incredibly brave, and it's not easy. And I just am in admiration of you
Thank you.
for opening up and being in a place where you've done the self work to be able to now openly share this journey, which was not easy at times. Where does your journey begin?
So I grew up always knowing that I was adopted. I can't necessarily pinpoint a time that my parents sat down and told me that I was adopted. It's just something that I always knew. My mother that raised me, I can remember when I was really little, she used to sing me a song. And I think that it's not a song like that's out there, and maybe I'll sing it for you because it's only like 3 lines. But she sang it to me, and I think that that gave me the knowing of just always knowing and never questioning it. And it was just always known amongst my family. I had an older sibling, an older brother that was adopted as well. So we just knew. So my mother used to sing me this song. It's kind of silly, but it was Everybody Needs a Little Sister. I'm not going to sing it in her tune. Everybody needs a little sister. That's why we adopted you, pretty Judy. And it, came in her song. And she would rock me and she would sing this to me. And I just always knew it. Even when I was 13, she would sing it to me. So I carried just always knowing. My parents could not conceive. So they had already adopted a son, 2 years older. And it was two days after my father's father passed away that they got news that there was a little girl for them from Catholic Family Charities. They got a call and they immediately were like, yes. And I don't know much in detail about that, but I know that they didn't have anything ready as far as a room. So I was in a bassinet in the dining room, and the joke of the family was, guess who's coming to dinner? And I arrived. So I think I just always knew, but I also, I don't know. I mean, I see pictures of myself when I was little. I was a mountain of curly hair, chubby cheeks, cute little smile, and adoption just was a part of me as much as it was, the color of my hair or the faith of my family. It was anything else about me. It was me. It was who I was. It was nothing to be embarrassed about. It was nothing to be ashamed about. All of our family, like all the family, very large Italian family, very accepting. And I seemed to just fit right in because I looked like everybody. Sometimes, as coming into a different family, being adopted, you don't necessarily look like your family, right? You might be a different ethnicity, hair color, eye color. My oldest brother had blonde hair and blue eyes, and it was a joke that he was a mailman's kid, which is probably not like the best thing to be saying nowadays. But then it seemed like that was funny. And so it didn't matter. I think maybe they joked because it didn't necessarily matter that any of us looked any different, but I did resemble my family. So if you didn't know, which I mean, even our community, most people, because my parents were both teachers, everybody knew. But if you didn't know, and you were told, you'd be like, oh, really? Because you look just like them.
Do you think that helped you personally?
No, I don't know if it helped them either. I mean, maybe in my like really young years, but I don't think that I was really paying much attention or aware that that even really mattered. And it's just something that I carried. I needed to know who I was, even though I knew that when I was old enough to understand what being adopted really was, I needed to know the rest. So I don't necessarily think that it helped. I remember being in high school where we'd start doing all of that, so those science projects, and who can roll their tongue, and this is genetic, and if your one parent has this and one parent has this, then you end up with this. And I was always like, I always felt left out when we would do those chapters. And then I would always be like, but I don't know. So it was just always in me that I had to know, more so with my biological mother than my father. And I don't know, I've never really understood that. Maybe because mothers and daughters have more strife growing up.
Your big kind of missing piece for you was finding out who your parents were, your biological parents were. And when did that questions in your mind start? And just tell us a little bit about the process and how that unfolded and when it got strong enough that you said, I need to do it.
I don't know if anybody else can resonate with this, and it's terrible to think about. And as a parent, I probably would not want to hear it. But now, I can kind of laugh, and then I can kind of go, geez, I was maybe a little bit of a brat. You'd get mad at your parents and you'd get in a fight and you'd pack your suitcase, and I'd have my little blue suitcase all packed up, and I'd go, walk across the street, and I'd maybe get around the block if I was lucky before they'd come. Sometimes they'd let me go a little further each time. And you get in your argument, you go, I'm going to find my real parents. And I was like, oh, now that I'm older, and I'm like, why would I have ever said that? But I think that it was probably common in conversations. I hear that a lot of, adopted kids have said that. But it's so I was young, having arguments with my parents, saying, I'm going to go find my real parents. It was always there. I don't think there was a time that it was ever not present that I didn't want to know. It just got stronger as I got older, because I knew that there was eventually going to be a time that my age would allow me to do it. And we dream, right? We dream. You remember the movie Fievel?
Yes, Bible Goes West or something, right?
It would make me think of my adoptive parents. And at my 8th grade graduation, we sang Somewhere Out There. And I was just like a ball of tears, because it reminded me of them. Like, there's somewhere out there. We make up all of these things in our minds about what it's going to be and what it's going to be like. Maybe they're millionaires, maybe we're famous, maybe this, maybe that. Well, none of that happened for me in that sense, but it's still, you have all of these thoughts. So as soon as I got to the age that I was, able to be considered an adult at 18, that's the first thing I did, was ask my parents to help begin the search.
And how did that feel? It's frightening. I know there was some hope, it sounded like.
I was really happy that my parents were always so supportive. It wasn't something that they were upset about. It didn't make them feel any less than, or like I was going to go have a different family and not be with them anymore. They were always like, okay, if this is what you want to do, we'll help you. I think I was a ball of nerves, really. What if she doesn't want to meet me? What if she's far away? What if she's deceased? What if she's not here and I'll never know my story? There were a million thoughts that raced through your head. And at 18, we talk about 25 being frontal lobe development. I was too young. I was definitely, now in retrospect at 47, 18 was not the time for me to do it. And my parents didn't know. They didn't know any better. They wanted to give me what I wanted. And I'm sure that parts of them probably wanted to know too.
Why do you say that you weren't ready?
I wasn't ready.
In what way?
I don't think that I understood anything at 18. I think that I thought I knew everything at 18. Like, I'm an adult now, so I know it all, but I knew nothing. I hadn't moved out and lived on my own yet. I wasn't a parent yet. I don't think I really even could understand the concept of the story, right? Because I was still a kid at 18 years old. I mean, we think that we that's it. We're labeled as adults. We can go do this, that, and the other. We're not, though. There's a lot of life experiences that haven't necessarily happened where you're going to be able to connect on what this journey is. And there's just so much that comes into this, like a whole nother family. And 18 was just not it. It was not it for me.
Right. Because I think, as you're going to get into a little bit, it wasn't a straightforward situation. And perhaps if it was golden, and magical, like you had perhaps, dreamed, like you said, maybe it would have been okay at 18, but as I'm sure very often, this is not a magical fairy tale. And so having that life perspective really could have helped you understand that. And tell us now, what happened when you found him?
Well, so 18 hits, and I tell my parents I want to search, and they immediately say okay, and they knew more information than I did. So Catholic Family Services gives like a little, then gave you like a little kind of summary of the ages of your parents' likes and dislikes. So I had some really basic stuff, that she liked art and he liked lifting, and really basic things, and that I was scared of the vacuum or something like that. Like, I don't know why that was on my sheet, but it said I was scared of a vacuum. I don't know. But you just have this little summary sheet. That's all. My parents gave that to me, and then they called Catholic Family Services, and I don't know. They never really gave me much detail, but
Tell us now, what happened when you found him?
well, so 18 hits, and I tell my parents I want to search, and they immediately say okay, and they knew more information than I did. So Catholic Family Services gives like a little, then gave you like a little kind of summary of the ages of your parents' likes and dislikes. So I had some really basic stuff, that she liked art and he liked lifting, and really basic things, and that I was scared of the vacuum or something like that. Like, I don't know why that was on my sheet, but it said I was scared of a vacuum. I don't know. But you just have this little summary sheet. That's all. My parents gave that to me, and then they called Catholic Family Services, and I don't know. They never really gave me much detail, but we had this plan that we were going to meet, and some of it is a little blurry, but for the most part, I remember getting flowers, and I was in awe that she was only 20 minutes away. And so it seemed so close yet so far. It was just, I was like, wow, we could have, our paths could have crossed a million times, and how would I have known? So the plan was to meet, and we went to a pizza place, and I met everybody all at once: cousins, aunts, and her mother, my biological grandmother. And that stood out to me the most. And she came up like, Italian, with the big, big open arms and a hug and squeezing your cheeks. And she said to me that, she was the reason why. Like, it was them that made her do it. She was 15, he was 17. And then 1976, that was unheard of. My grandfather was a local law enforcement officer, and maybe it had something to do with, just what people would know in the community. My grandmother genuinely seemed to want to be apologizing for my mother. And so I just nodded to it, because what did I know? Okay, thanks. Now I know that.
How did it make you feel, her apology?
So I think that it answered to me that, 15 and 17 made sense to say, okay, so she was too young to have a baby, and I'm thankful that she had me. And I grew up in a loving family. So maybe if that circumstance was different, I might have a little bit more anger, but I felt like I was blessed that I grew up in a wonderful family, and, my parents were doing the best that they could. And so I don't think that I was ever angry about it, just more so curious. And so, like, we all got together, we have lunch, and in the same day, I meet my biological father. So I think at 18 for me, and in 15 years difference for my mother, it was probably a lot for her to unravel something in her life, right? So, and I'm not thinking of that, I'm thinking of me, right? But in retrospect now, as I get older, I think that must have been really hard for her. And the same day she locates him, and he's another town or two over, and we go, do you want to see him? Do you want to meet him? Oh, okay. I'm like, I guess, sure, we're going to go and do this. And we go over to this apartment complex where I meet him and maybe his girlfriend or wife, and a little girl that's maybe 3 years old, who I guess that's my half sister, and his mother. And they live in the same complex. So my other grandmother. It's a lot of people to meet all in one
A
day.
lot. And was that a coincidence or planned to be all one big day?
I think that the meeting him was a coincidence, but I think my biological mother planned to have all of the family, because I think everybody knew. And like, as I tell this, I can piece some things together in my own mind, go, now that you like see all of these stories, I go, maybe she needed their approval, and bringing all of them to say, see, she found me, and this is what I had to do. And I'll get emotional on this. This is what I had to do, but she found me, and she wants to be here. You know what I mean? Like, she loves me. Maybe, I don't know. I never asked that question. Maybe someday I'll ask that. But my father, no, like, I think that was her, I never really asked it, but I think that that was a piece of her that she was like, okay, here, you know what I mean? This is this is our daughter. And so he kind of like, was really kind of nonchalant, like, I don't know if you're my daughter. I just want to know my medical stuff, that would be important for me and my children when I get older. And he, said something sarcastic, and I said something sarcastic back because I'm 18. So, and my grandmother, his mother was like, oh, I wrote you all these letters. I've always tried to contact you. And I thought, wow, this is crazy. Like, there's no way this woman could have ever wrote me any letters to where she doesn't know where I am. That's not how adoptions were done. So I'm thinking she's crazy. This whole scenario is now getting really overwhelming in the day. And so we leave and we stay in contact. But the biological grandmother on his side constantly kept calling me and wanted me to do a DNA test. And I was like, no, thank you. If that's what she says, then I believe it. I look a lot like both of them. And I didn't really need to know on his end. And I must have 20 brothers and sisters. Like, he's just out there, he still doesn't claim, who I am. And I'm okay with that. Like, I don't seem to think I really care about it. I think that that's more his issue than mine. And his life has not been wonderful for him. And so I'm thankful that my grandmother did make that decision for her, because it could have gone in a different direction.
I want to pause
Could
there
have
for a
worked.
minute, because that level of compassion just strikes me. It's incredible. So what you're saying is you're grateful that your mother, your biological mother's mother, made that decision for your mother because perhaps that your biological father was not right for her. And had she kept you and they kept you, it would have tied her to him. And so imagine the amount of strength and self-work that you need to do to come to that kind of place of selflessness is incredible. And that's incredible, Judy. When do you think you arrived at that
Oh,
level of peace?
yesterday? No, I mean, I think it's taken a long time. I think that I've always been grateful to be present. So I knew that there was always another option, that she could have taken a different route. So I was always thankful to be present, because then I wouldn't have all the things that I have. So you go, oh, I wouldn't have my children, or my life wouldn't have gone this way. And my journey is my journey. So I'm never going to be sad about the decisions, even though it carries emotions. I think that I've become better aware of it. I think I've always felt that way, but I've become more aware of what that actually means after I became a parent. I don't think that, again, at 18, what did I know? Like, okay, I met her, and then I don't know. It wasn't what I anticipated or expected, or my dream world. And, now what am I going to do, and where am I going to go with that? So, I went on and lived life, but I think that as a part of what I carried was a struggle of relationships. So not always picking the best choices for men. And my oldest daughter's father, who I love to this day dearly, but it was not a good relationship, and I should not have been there as long as I was there. And I thought, you carry this feeling of rejection, and you figure, well, I can fix him. I can fix him. It's fine. You know what I mean? Like, I can make him love me, and it'll be okay. And he, developed an addiction, and was not very faithful. And I was always like, oh no, it's okay. And I was always making an excuse for it when I should have just been gone, but I stayed. So 7 years later, 5, 6 years later, I become pregnant with my oldest daughter. And I did not have my college degree yet. I hadn't gone to college yet. I was dabbling in, moving out of my parents' house, and thought it'll be great, enter the world of debt. I'll figure out college later. So I was going very reversed, and I can see the disappointment on my family's face, but I had an opportunity to keep her and be a parent and do the things that I didn't necessarily, I didn't want to give her up. I knew that. I knew I wanted to keep her. She wasn't planned per se, but she was loved. She was conceived from love. And it was just one of those things where I was like, okay, we're just going to hit the ground running. And now I'm a mom. Her biological father didn't meet her until she was about 3 months old. And by now, he has continued to progress in addiction, and it's gotten harder and harder. So I now have a decision to make, and I chose to not have her continue a relationship with him or any of his family. And it was very kind of his parents to respect that, although they really truly wanted to always be a part of her life. I just felt uncomfortable. Like, how could I bring in half and not the other half and explain this to her? So I made a decision for her to say, she's not going to know. And that was so hard for me because of where I was. Like, now I'm making a choice to have her, but now I'm taking away a part of her. But I did it to protect her. So in a sense, I kind of relay it to, well, did she give me up to protect me? Because it could have been like this. And at about between 7 and 9, I decided to terminate Bella's father's rights. And he willingly, at this point, said that he would terminate his rights. His addiction got very, very intense. And he was in and out of jail. And it wasn't a good path for him, and he didn't know where he would end up. And I always cared about him. If something were to happen to him tomorrow, where would she go? Or if something were to happen to me tomorrow, where would she go? Would she go to him? And how is he going to raise her? It was agreed by the state that we would terminate his rights. But I never said to him that she would never know him. But I never knew how that was going to happen. I didn't have a conversation with my husband at the time, and I made a decision. There was really no thought behind it, on a whim one day, that it just felt right to me that I was like, she's going to meet them and she's going to know them. And it was a holiday and everybody was getting together for pictures, and everybody wanted, it just seemed like it was time. She was like maybe 10. So we went up and she met her brother, she met her half brother, 2 half brothers, and her half sister, and her father, her grandparents, her aunt, her uncle, and all 3 of their children, all on the same day. Now in retrospect, and as I've sat here and like kind of unfolded my story, it's the same thing.
It's so
Same
interesting.
exact thing that I went through, and I did not expect it like that.
Do you think if you hadn't gone through your experience with adoption and how that unfolded, and how you didn't know your parents, your biological parents, until a certain point in your life, do you think you would have had the wherewithal to have a strategy of, okay, this is Bella's father is not a good person for her in her life right now. I'm going to remove him from her life, and maybe they can reconnect another day. Do you think you would have had that plan had you not been through that experience yourself?
I don't know. Probably not. I mean, had I not been adopted and could understand adoption, that probably wouldn't have been on my radar at all. I probably just, I don't know what direction I would have gone in. Maybe I wouldn't have been with him, because maybe I wouldn't have carried rejection, so I wouldn't have stayed as long as I did. I think things would have mapped out completely differently altogether. But I think understanding adoption made me be able to make those decisions, for her. And I mean, it's hard. How do I know what the best is? How do I know she's 9? How do I know she's going to want that? I just knew the situation, and there was other children before and after the fact, and there were struggles with those children being cared for, and his presence, and I did not want that for her. And I just knew I had to work a lot harder. I was, thankful that my family was supportive, and I was going to do everything I could to protect this girl.
Amazing.
I think, and I think I'm kind of actually discovering it as I'm saying it. I think that what I gave to her when she met them was probably my hope that the way that I thought my meeting would go would be like that for her meeting. Do you know what I mean? Like when I met everybody, that maybe I thought when she met everybody, it would be more of a fairy tale versus than it was for me, or that it would be okay because I was okay, so it'll be okay for her. So I think that I held on to hope for that for her, that it would be all right. And honestly, she was fine, but she didn't really know until afterwards. And on the way home, it just happened. Like we just had a conversation where I was like, this is what it is. And she wasn't shell shocked, but she was a little shocked. He spent his entire life in and out of jail and in and out of contacting her, where she finally just was like, no, thank you, no more. I need to be well within myself. And she has the same exact feelings of rejection that she grows up with. And I wish that I could take that away for her. And sometimes I feel guilty that I shared it, but how could she not know? She has to know who she is.
I'm sure you have a certain perspective and wisdom that you can offer her for this scenario that is unique.
Yeah.
And even though she may not realize it now, I'm sure it is helping her.
I try my best, and I do. I try to help her through those emotions. And while all of this has happened, going back to my journey on part of my biological mother, so at 23, I have Isabella, and I go back and we have conversations and we try to connect again, because now I feel like I have an understanding of what it's like to be a parent. So I can understand it better to try to build that connection with her. We had years of in and out and holidays together, and then we would fall apart, and then we wouldn't talk, and then we would talk again. And it felt like it was like that forever, until I finally said, no, thank you, no more. My half sister was 16. She decided that she didn't want to live with my mother anymore, my biological mother, and she wanted to move out. She moved out, but she didn't move back in with my mother, and then she moved out on her own. And we had some time apart, and then we rekindled, but sewn at the hip, like that's my sister. And it's odd because it's like she was never not my sister. She's been there forever. My brothers and sisters, a little bit different in relationships, but I still love him just the same. But it's like they've always been there. But when we would get together, like my mother owned a business, we all look alike in some way, even though that my brother and sister have a different father. We all have very strong genes, dark hair, dark eyes. You can tell that we're all related. People would come into my mother's business and ask who I was, and she wouldn't introduce me as her daughter. And I was trying to have a relationship with her, and it broke me every time. Like, are you embarrassed? You know, and it would be about like, well, it's nobody's business. And I'd be okay with it to a point, but not really. It would like hurt me every single time. So I would start to get angry. And it was evident that she loved my brother and sister, and she had a life with them. And here I am much later in life with my own children. It was really hard to establish what those relationships would be like. And it didn't feel as welcoming as I hoped it would be. We spent a lot of time apart, and she would be mad. And I think that she's never really admitted to her journey and the pieces that she needed to go through. And maybe me being there present for her made that as a reminder of something that she hadn't dealt with. She said she didn't really feel like that.
That makes a lot of sense. I think it's so at this point, you now have a degree of compassion again for her not having been able to come to terms with her story and not done the work that you've done. And that's sad. How does that make you feel? Do you have a peace with that? Do you feel sorry for her? Is there anger?
All of those, yes, and yes. All of those really, and it comes in waves. My sister now has a son. He's going to be 2, and I love my nephew dearly, and I would do anything for him as much as for my own girls. When we all get together, and she's present, and she's there, and she knows my girls. We've tried to have relationships. They call her naughty, but she doesn't contact them, and she doesn't contact me. And it's like the reasons behind it is it's on me. Is it? You know what I mean? I still feel like a little girl in that sense, that, why is it on me? Why do I have to do that? I'm not gonna. I envision like she's going to apologize, or she's going to try to ignite that. But then there's a part of me that says, don't bother and just stay away. You're safer to just stay away. And it makes me mad. It makes me sad. I think that I just had to find peace with it within myself, and you just keep moving. So you feel like, as I said in the beginning, like you feel like you had a loss of something that you never had, and then you experience it and you haven't, and then you feel like, and then afterwards, for me, I feel like I grieve it. So now it's a loss all over again. You just kind of like go through the motions. I mean, so my mother also has a sister. And so years later, oh gosh, years later, probably decades, I found out that she lives in the same town as me. And I met her, and that brought me peace, because that's me. Because she's exactly like me, like temperament, personality, everything, you know what I mean? Her empathy, like I felt like a real connection, more so than I found with my biological mother. And I found that odd, because it wasn't necessarily that I was seeking that because of something I didn't have. It just was an immediate connection to me. And I learned more. I learned that, when my mother was when I was 6 months old, that she came and saw me after she gave me up, which, brings you a little bit more like, oh, she really did love me. Like when you think of that rejection feeling, like, oh, she really did care about me. And my father brought her to see me. And then my aunt, who tells me, I wanted to take you, like I wanted to adopt you. but I couldn't, like I wasn't in a place in life where I could be able to do that, but I wish I did and I wanted to. And that warms your heart when you hear things like that. But everybody just keeps on moving and life keeps on happening.
You are you and they are them. And even though they made, these decisions, it doesn't mean that you aren't whole.
Right.
And how do you feel now? It sounds like you're working through that process, but do you have
I
that
think,
perspective?
yeah, I think when I talk about it, it's always going to be emotional. And when you unravel it, you learn. I think you said in the beginning about learning and your journey. And I think the good part about this is to always let yourself continue to learn. And I think that, like I said, each time I tell my story, I heal a little bit more, but I discover a little bit more about that for myself. And it helps because I think that there definitely is a piece now, but it will never be complete. There's still going to be some chapters that aren't written. And I don't feel an immediate pressure or need to keep banging down the door to make it be something that it might not be.
Love that. It is a continuous journey. I think even for those of us who haven't gone through something so significant in their life, it's everything is a continuous learning process. You've learned so much. What is something that you would like to impart?
The laws have changed. So people can now get their records and they can seek out their families and vice versa. So things are starting to open up. So the information is more present. And the discussions that I have with people now at this age, at 47, is to just really think before you do it of what you want and what your expectations may be. And just think about life. Think about the life that you've lived and where you are now, and think about where they may be. People may not know. It may be wanted to be kept a secret, you know what I mean? They may not want to open that can of worms, lack of a better term, and you may bring something to them that they're not ready to receive. But don't let that carry you, right? Don't let that hurt. And then for those that are the parents that are being sought, that one to me probably is like the biggest thing, is to speak to them and say, before you go and open your arms, or before you open this, be prepared to accept that child and love that child, because they may be 47 like me, but they're still a child. They're still that child that you chose to give a different life to. I never say gave up, because that's not how I look at it. I wasn't given up. I was given to. So really think about that before you open that up, because they're going to be seeking your approval. I don't think there's one person that I've spoken to that's been adopted that doesn't want their adoptive parent, their parents that gave them up, their biological families, to accept them and be proud of them. Look at who I am. Look at what I became. And they want that. I think all of us do. So I really want those parents to take that in. If they're not ready to, then just say that. Be open, be honest, don't be misleading, and don't take on something that you might not be able to do. And then for us, we'll be able to find peace differently.
That's such a great piece of advice for anyone listening who may be considering that or in that position. There's so many complex emotional parts to it. Is there some highlight for you that in going through this, you say to yourself, I'm really glad I went through this because...
Yeah, I don't think I would. I'm not one of those to say I would change this, and this, because it's made me who I am. And I've been able to discover who I am. And there's things that you learn consistently where you're like, oh, it's not necessarily, biological or the way that I was raised, because some things are just biologically in you. It's crazy when you connect all those pieces. What are the benefits? What are the highlights? What are the good parts? I have an amazing aunt and uncle that love me. I have a great brother, a sister who I adore, a nephew. I get to be an auntie. And I mean, it's okay. It's just okay. And I'm okay with it all. And those pieces that may come with some sorrows or some tears are worth it.
Where's your path forward from here? What does your life look like now?
Well, I'm a mom of two girls, 23 and 16. I got a wonderful job. I find work that is purposeful. So I've always been a public servant in the community, and anything that I can do to lend a hand. But this part of my journey speaks to me so much as I get older, that I want this to be encompassed in that. So whether or not I can offer some advocacy in the future, or how I can continue to tell my story to be able to connect with others is a really important component for me in the future. So I feel like I want this to follow with me, to be able to help others and to be able to have those uncomfortable conversations so that, people can be more comfortable about it.
Amazing. Is there anything else you would like to share that maybe we didn't get to?
It's just a wonderful opportunity. Like, I'm amazed that this exists, and I'm so thankful for it because, and when I tell people that I'm telling it, they're just like, I want to tell my story. And that warms my heart because we need to tell those stories. It's who we are. And I think that it not only gives us an opportunity to heal in a different way, it's a release, but we can all connect. Together, we can kind of do great things for adoption's not going away, right? It's always going to be present. There will always be some sort of a need. And we can kind of change how that once was to how it can be for others by sharing our story.
I love that so much. And that is what SAYge is all about, because whether it's adoption or a divorce or a new career path or a parenting issue, there's so many things that we go through in life that we can connect with each other on, that breeds this sense of we're not alone and we can make things better together by sharing these stories. I am so honored to have had you share your story, and thank you. And I know you're going to continue on a wonderful path, and thank you for helping inspire our community with your journey and connect with others who may be grappling with this right now.
Thank you. Thank you for giving the opportunity for us to tell stories.